In this video, we will talk about factors influencing the transfer of training in an industrial setting. So, there are few things that we need to consider. A number of opportunities can be designed for trainees to practice. Each practice will facilitate training more or less effectively depending on the KSAs to be learnt. There is massed or spaced practice. Research has shown that material learned via the spaced practice is generally retained longer than material learned under the method of massed practice. However, it has been seen that the spaced practice requires longer training cycles and the management of organizations generally avoid it. Training departments of the organization need to become more creative in developing training programs that essentially allow for spaced practice. This approach gives trainees time to think about their KSAs and even practice their own KSAs for further improvement. However, complex and difficult tasks have been seen to be effective and performed better when massed practice is provided first, followed by small and brief sessions with regular break intervals. Whole is part learning. It is difficult to design part task training in many cases. Whole training programs are much easier because the design can be a model of a real device. Even when the task in the training program can be divided into different parts, the whole learning method is preferred when the intelligence levels are high in the trainees. When the training material is high in task organization but low in complexity, and when practice is spaced rather than massed. Task organization refers to the degree to which different tasks in a training program are interrelated. Task complexity refers to the level of difficulty in performing each task. In designing any training program, it is not practical to attempt to subdivide the task into different parts. Even if it is possible to subdivide them into different parts, the whole learning method still needs to be used if the task organizations were high. But if the task organizations were low, the part learning method could be used. Another option here could be progressive part training, which can be used when the tasks are not as clear in the organization, wherein both whole and part learning methods are used. This way, the trainee learns each step but at the same time learns the integration of all the steps. Overlearning is the process of providing trainees with continued practice for far beyond the point at which they perform the task effectively. This is very similar to automaticity. The more the task is overlearned, the better is its retention. Overlearning is valuable for tasks that are not performed frequently or if the chance to practice them is very limited. Even when the material is overlearned, it is essential to put mechanisms in place to reinforce the use and the practice of the learned behaviors on a continuous basis, especially when it is recently developed as KSA. When trainees practice a skill beyond the ability to perform a task, the responses become more automatic and eventually do not require thinking. And for this, overlearning is extremely important for task and high-intensity emergency situations. Overlearning also occurs after a great amount of on-the-job practice, which is automaticity. Automaticity is a level where the performance is fluid and requires very little conscious effort, and it is automatic. Automaticity through the process of overlearning should be designed in training programs where the tasks to be performed are in highly stressful situations or those tasks are not encountered frequently in one's job and hence should be performed effectively whenever it occurs. Maximum similarity is also known as identical elements. The more the elements in the training program are similar to the actual work setting, the more likely is that a positive transfer of training will occur. The two areas of similarity are the tasks to be performed and the environment in which they are to be performed. After a basic skill is learned, it is necessary for trainees to practice the skill in a similar environment to their actual workplace environment to ensure transfer of training. When we vary the situation or when the conceptual or administrative skill training is required, a good deal of variability often characterizes typical situations and the use of identical elements is not effective. The general principle approach is more useful here. It is difficult to provide specific training for what to do in every situation that might arise for the management trainees. Therefore, it becomes necessary to provide a framework for which is to be taught what is being taught. Training management trainees using general principles will better equip them to handle novel situations. Other factors to facilitate transfer of trainings could be providing feedback to trainees is important to learning and transfer of training to the job. Feedback performs these functions. It allows them to correct their responses and make necessary adjustments in their behavior. It makes learning more interesting and encouraging for trainees to continue their good performance. It leads to specific goals to maintain or increase performance. When feedback is provided, it is better to indicate that the level of performance is to be controlled by the trainee. Inexperienced trainee may try to be supportive by suggesting that the task at hand is difficult and so many problems faced in mastering it is understandable. This approach would reinforce a low self-efficacy. Research indicates that trainee can master the task when feedback indicates it, and it also improves his or her self-efficacy. And individuals with self-efficacy tend to be highly motivated and also tend to achieve more. Frequent opportunity should be provided in the training design to provide feedback. If the training group is very large, a lot of time is consumed providing feedback. To help overcome this, other trainees can be used to provide feedback. A combination of relapse prevention and goal setting is also would be used. A major reason for the transfer of training not occurring is that the trainees face the same pressures when they are back on the job, which had earlier reduced their performance effectiveness. One of the strategies used called a relapse prevention sensitizes the trainees to the fact that their pressures that reduced effectiveness could relapse and help them prepare to identify the situations which will result in preventing the relapse and help them develop strategies to cope to prevent the relapses. Goal setting also increases the likelihood of transfer of learning. In the process of goal setting, trainees are required to meet and discuss the goals they have set for themselves and how are they going to go about achieving them. In the training program, when this method is used, the trainees are required to maintain records of their goals, accomplishments, and also discuss these accomplishments publicly in front of the entire training group. This public commitment through discussion with fellow trainees, recording of behaviors, and monitoring by trainers helps in increasing the likelihood of transfer of training. Research has also shown that relapse prevention is not always successful without goal setting. The contribution of both relapse prevention and goal setting is a powerful technique to initiate transfer of training. Relapse prevention uses both cognitive and behavioral components to facilitate permanent, long-term maintenance of the recently learned behavior. Trainees have the strategies to cope with the relapse when they face one once they complete the training program. The addition of goal setting and public commitment to these strategies only further strengthens the process of transfer. When we have to facilitate transfer, we have to focus on organizational intervention. It is useful to harness as much as possible on the job to facilitate an increased likelihood of transfer of training. If present in the job environment, facilitate the smooth and effective transfer of training. One of the important factors influencing transfer of training is supervisory support. Supervisors need to be aware of and understand the behavior that the trainees have acquired and should support them when they use these recently acquired behaviors on the job. Supervisors can also affect training and its transfer in a lot of other ways. If employees who are motivated to improve their performance receive such support from the supervisors or superiors, their motivation to perform better is increased. Other facts that influence a trainee's motivation to learn are their perception of the relevance of training they undertake and reducing the negative side effects of attending the training program, both of which, when controlled by the supervisor, can help increase the transfer of training. Research indicates that the peer support can also have a very good impact on transfer of training. Learning should be included as one of the ongoing process of any organization and become the responsibility of the employees and managers to facilitate it. It should be understood that training is important and necessary to achieve overall organizational goals and achieve objectives. Research has emphasized the role of the trainer even in helping the transfer of training. It has been seen that trainees who are due to a meeting with the trainer and the other trainees of the group to discuss the transfer process use training effectively in the work conditions. It also helps in assessing the performance of the trainees and provide appropriate feedback. Chances of successful transfer of training are enhanced when they are contingent upon reward systems. Employees are aware of the fact that certain behavior brings them rewards, others can get them into trouble. If the behaviors that are trained are not reinforced, the likelihood of their being exhibited are minute. In a systems approach to training where the organization as a whole is involved, as many forces from within the organization need to be focused on reinforcing the recently learned behavior in order to ensure successful transfer. Although the involvement of the supervisors, peers, reward systems influence the organization's climate and culture, it is very essential in the wake of the learned behavior to be transferred to the actual job situation. Climate is generally understood to be the perception of salient features of the organization. Features like company policies, reward system, and reactions by the management are all important in determining the climate of that organization. Culture is defined as a pattern of basic assumptions invented, discovered, or developed by a group within any organization. It can also be a set of shared understandings about the organization. A continuous learning culture is reflected by the fact that the learning is a key aspect of one's job and it shows a positive effect on transfer of training. Continuous learning culture is influenced by various factors such as the level of challenge offered by the job, peer and supervisor support, and other systems of the organization that allow the employees to learn continuously and receive training proportionate to the requirement of the learning new cases. Influencing climate and culture is a difficult and long process to change. This necessitates a change from the top hierarchy of the organization. Any mismatch of the training goals and organizational climate should be emphasized in need analysis, and the information should be made available to the HR manager. Thus, the HR managers are now responsible to see that the company's management understands and resolves any differences between the existing climate and culture and the organization's objective. Thank you.